The nose thing was, again, I was there for the nose. The nose was the nose, the Dick Tracy nose, I like to call it, was definitely in existence during when we did Want to Bet, the last book. So that was an issue, and he just, listen, you can't make someone do something, they're not going to do. As he always said on the show, Artie's going to do what Artie's going to do.
Let's get into I know there's a ton of father stuff, but I mean, the cable over the thing, do you think he really believes that this is why he's so messed up, is because of that moment?
I mean, it's
Did you realize? I mean,
that wouldn't have worked out.
No. Well, did you know of? Were you a Stern listener? Did you know of him? Were you a fan? And did you realize he was kind of off? Was he already? I mean, by the time you guys write that first book, he's already had his sleeping on the air and kind of talked about his heroin. So just tell me a little bit about the history of you knowing about him, and then were you understanding this is going to be a strange guy to work with?
Yeah, well, I grew up on Long Island, so I mean, I was a Stern guy for sure. That was a huge part of my upbringing, and I totally knew about Artie, and I thought it was hilarious. And I really, I always had friends in school that were the ones that got in trouble, and it's kind of the same way with a lot of the more difficult yet super interesting people I've chosen to co-write with. I guess I just like that kind of crap. So I knew what the issues might be and stuff like that, but. I had basically lived with Tommy Lee. I had written with Slash. So I kind of knew a bit of that. And Artie's just so damn funny. I wanted to do it. So charming. And we had a lot in common, but being Italian American and stuff like that. So I wasn't worried about that. And also, we did Too Fat to Fish. This is deep in the period for everyone who's read all the books and knows the Artie lore. This is the period where he was most together with the lying and the keeping it together, yet doing shit on the sly. So that was the best period, and there were definitely, moments where I knew what was going on, but Artie wasn't going to admit anything, and I was just there to make the best book possible. So have some fun too, always. But yeah.
Yeah, I teased this episode with a little bit of his cameo page. I don't know if you've talked to him of late. Tell me any communications. Do you keep in touch with him? If you do, how is he? The cameo page makes me a little scared.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to Artie in a minute. Not since the pandemic. I keep tabs on him through people. Artie's tough. Yes, we had just a little bit of a falling out over some bullshit. And on the third book that we did, he was, he was really not in a good way, but he really screwed the pooch in a lot of ways with the book release and promotion and all that stuff, which was frustrating. But part of the territory. I'm not annoyed about that at all. All is forgiven. I love Artie, but no, I haven't talked to him in a minute. Yeah, but like I said, I know I talk to someone who does keep in touch pretty regularly. So I guess it's time. I'd like to talk to him again. I hope he's doing okay. The stuff I've seen make me sad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when you wrote the third book, was the nose issue already happening? Did you get to deal with him at that period of time? Because everyone's curious about that period of time, because we didn't hear him on the show. So all we had to do was see his Twitter and possibly a podcast.
Yep. I mean, the second book, Crash and Burn, dealt with the 2 years after Stern and severe depression and getting cleanish. And then he sort of, was set up for this great comeback, essentially, with Crashing and all this stuff with Judd Apatow and everything. The nose thing was, again, I was there for the nose. The nose was in the nose, the Dick Tracy nose, I like to call it, was definitely in existence during when we did Want to Bet, the last book. So that was an issue, and he just listen, you can't make someone do something they're not going to do. As he always said on the show, Artie's going to do what Artie's going to do. So yeah, the nose was happening, and things just got worse. The pandemic was really hard on him, and but he is finally sober now. From everything I hear and from everything I can kind of see, and a changed person, I think, after all the years of abuse. But I don't know, man. It's a sad situation.
What was it like to document him, stabbing himself? That was sort of the weirdest moment, because I was a huge fan and a listener, and I really thought, man, if Artie leaves, I won't probably listen to this show. I really don't. I mean, I don't find it as entertaining as it was with him, but I felt just terrible. What was it like to hear that news in your own personal, and then when you recounted with him, what was it like to see him kind of discuss? Because I just went back and I read this part because it's just so crazy that he does talk about it in great detail, but clearly just out of it, right? I mean, just stabbing himself. He had no idea what he was doing.
He, you hear this a lot from addicts and stuff. He relapsed and had so much shame about it that he just didn't want to be there. So he was like, stick from the drugs and the shame, and the whole thing sort of came together, and he was out of it. I mean, he drank bleach, you know what I'm saying? And he knew that there was an intervention. I think he knew, or his mom was coming over. I don't think he knew that it was going to be a full intervention with everybody. I'm glad it was, because walking into that would be really hard on anyone to A, deal with quickly and efficiently, and B, the psychological and emotional effects, right, of his poor mother. The thing about Artie that was always great is that he let me go really detailed. I like to kind of really make whatever I write try to come off the page as much as possible for people, even if it's gross. So, for example, like the pig and shit chapter was on Stern. He gave me an audio of that. That was kind of how I earned his trust, actually, very early in the Too Fat to Fish process. He gave me the audio of that from on the air and was like, let's see what you do with this. And I wrote the chapter that I wrote that essentially is the way it is. Just went as detailed as possible, like every micro detail. And that was kind of it. So he knew that, as difficult as it was to actually write, because this guy is my friend, I care about him. I wanted to do that for that scene as well. And, he gave me the material to do it. He's just, the thing about him is when we would go over the more difficult or just desperate or ridiculous things he had done, he doesn't shy away from the details. So he'd be brave about that. And it was like he was talking about somebody else, which in some ways it is, when you're that messed up. But he never in any of the books did he have he does have shame, but he didn't shy away from the reality of the most sort of the lowest points of his life.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answered your question.
No.
That's kind of what we went for.
I was going to say, how do you construct these with him? Especially, like I said, Crash and Burn is they're great. Both of them are great, but obviously this one gives you more detail, kind of the background. Okay, he knew what he was doing, because you always wondered, what was it like trying to kind of craft a book with him, and how do you sort of sit with him? Do you come up with sort of the chapter ideas? Does he kind of just give me that semantics of that with him?
Sure. Well, Artie, he's a great storyteller, as anyone who's listened to the Stern show when he was on it, which, by the way, I agree with you. Not the same show without him. And it hasn't been, and Howard's kind of turned a corner, still one of the greatest interviewers of our lifetime. But anyway, just wanted to agree with you there. He always had a really good sense of what makes a good story and which elements of his life, he wanted to talk about. So more so than, some of the musicians that I'd work with who don't really think in necessarily a linear or a textual sense. Artie kind of had that from just being on the air and doing stand-up. So him telling stories were always great. And there was always, I would kind of go there. I mean, this changed for different times, but the general thing is that we'd get together. He would have some ideas. He would kind of send them to me, or give me a notebook with ideas. And we would kind of do sessions where we'd go over certain stories. A lot of times he would just kind of take the tape recorder and almost like he was doing stand-up, walk around the apartment and shit. And I'd be sitting there and asking follow-up questions. So I'd get the loose framework from him. Then I would kind of go in and write it, send it to him with questions or with jokes, this is my attempt at a joke. I know you got a better one. And sometimes some of the greatest parts is where Artie was like, that joke's awesome. It stays. And I was like, oh, I'm making him laugh. Yes. So, that's kind of how it worked. It would be it started to become Too Fat to Fish was obviously his just autobiography. Right. And then after that, it became everything that happened next, so the structure more became his life just got darker and stranger. So that became the structure. Too Fat to Fish was a collection of stories and I sort of arranged it more like chronologically or asked about different periods of time. But it always kind of fired a wonderful narrative. Like he was just in a better place when he wrote that. So I think he was, his comedic chops were up. He was on the radio every day, even though he was like falling asleep on the air. He was still killing it. Like anyone who saw him doing stand-up during that period, he was amazing. So it was like throwing material at somebody at the top of their game. It was easier then. The other times were, same process. When Artie would be in a bad place or when we were discussing something that was really hard for him, he started not even wanting to meet. So he would he bought a couple of the same recorders that I use for interviews and would do them alone in his house. Some of those recordings are definitely pretty messed up. And then send them to me and I would have it I transcribed it and then I get in and edit it and do my thing. So that's kind of how it went. He liked the writing process, he wrote a couple things, but mostly it was like I said, almost like a stand-up routine, oral, recorded, and then I would take it from there, build it up, send it back to him. He would make some changes, make it better, and then that's it.
I'm not an addict. I don't know if you are. I don't want to get into your background, but I just don't. I just in my head, I think it really hit home. Honestly, just recently when Matthew Perry wrote a book and he did an interview circuit. Now this guy's on Friends, and he's coming drunk and drugged, and just the way he described all of it took me back to sort of Artie thinking, okay, because in my head I'm like, how is Artie blowing all of these opportunities, going on Stern and Letterman and Conan, and he's on the Joe Buck. Why is he fucking this up all the time? And then after watching,
myself that.
and then I watched the Matthew Perry thing. I'm like, Matthew Perry had way more to lose. He's on a giant show, and it made me sort of understand the whole thing. So watching Dark Side of the Comedy on Vice, you were part of that. I thought you were great, along with a lot of people that had been on this show. Do you think Artie would like that show? Do you think he was proud that he was one of the 10 selected? And thoughts on just what his mindset would be if he saw that show?
Man, I don't know where his head's at. He has been sober, and I'm not, but people very close to me are addicts, are sober, and can always point out a lot of the psychology involved. And your whole brain changes essentially when you're totally off of everything for a while. So I don't know how he would process that. I mean, when I did that interview, I got very emotional and just missed him and wanted it. I hope that he would see it. You always hope that something you do or say is going to affect a person like that and maybe help them make a change to just stay around. That's all you can, that's all you can do. Because you can send them to rehab as many times as you want. If they don't want to do the work, they're not going to do the work. And obviously substances, the Matthew Perry book was gnarly. And he's somebody that seems very angry still. But I like that he was so real about just how much it controls you and just how repetitive it gets, that is the thing that you care about more than anything else. Nothing else matters. Just want to go get high and get fucked up.
And he mentions too, and that the getting off of it is the hardest part because you feel so good, and now you've got this base of feeling this way, and when you don't have it, now you're not medicated, and this is a 2-week thing, a struggle. So of course, why would you want to feel like shit for 2 weeks if you're going to feel this way? It did finally. I mean, maybe you wrote about it. Maybe maybe I'm just naive, but it really was. I think it was a Diane Sawyer interview or something, but it was very, okay, I understand now. When you are that famous, it doesn't matter, No,
it doesn't matter at all. If anything, the fame, and Artie says this in the books a couple times, that he didn't become an opiate addict until he was rich, and he's glad for that. So the fame, if anything, gives you more passes. You can get away with more shit. Hollywood loves a comeback, but eventually they don't. I think that's what happened to art, to be honest. But I think that the fame makes you feel even more invincible. Or, you could just go to a fancy rehab again and clean out before you have to do a project. I think it gives you more excuses.
What did you think of how Howard handled that the last 3 or 4 years? It just, the sleeping on the air became a bit, and he played stupid, as did Robin, as did Fred, and I think finally at the end, obviously they fired him before the end of 2009. But what were your thoughts? It was great radio. It was funny, but at some point you have to really check yourself and go, what are we doing here, right? I mean, what did you think of the way Orlando Jones said it was enabling? Give me your thoughts on just what you heard during.
I agree with Orlando. I totally agree with Orlando. When they were, couldn't be more thankful to have my book that I wrote with him, like, promoted so well for 6 months straight. You know what I mean? Like, they made it a thing. It was like its own bit. It was like, let's talk about this part of the book and all that stuff. That was fantastic. But a lot of it was painful for me to listen to. I listened to all of it, but knowing what he had been through and knowing that he was teetering a little bit, I thought it was too much. Like, I agree with Orlando. I don't think it helped. I think it probably made it seem, it made it into a bit for him. It made it into the thing that people it made him, I think, these are the things that people like about you. I think it almost like that's probably the message that he was getting, like, this is what people want. Stories about you being fucked up. That's going to make you want to go get fucked up. It just is, It's like, you're an alcoholic shouldn't go, I don't know, wine tasting for 2 weeks, like with people who are wine tasting, something like that. I don't know if I'm making a good enough metaphor, but I think that it was hard to listen to. They were making light of a situation that is certainly funny because it's Artie. He makes waking up in your own shit funny, but it's really not underneath that. So I totally agree that it was a little too celebrated and definitely enabling and in a way making light of it, if that makes sense too.
Well, and he fought everybody on the show too. He fought Teddy, he fought Sal, he fought Richard and Gary, and Howard loved it as a bit, right? And unfortunately, it was interesting radio. I have to say, I did enjoy it myself.
Oh, it was great radio. It was car crash. Couldn't look away. It was really great radio, but it did take a toll.
I didn't. And the last thing from the Dark Side showed the cable over his bed. Would that come up in the books? I don't remember seeing or hearing about that, but I think Tim Sabian or somebody wrote about going to his room and there was a cable that his dad, reminding him of his father. And I think he, in essence, tries to kind of take all of the things that have happened or people have told him. Your father, falling and becoming quadriplegic and you not being there, you usually hold the ladder. A lot of people try to be some, psychologists. Dr. Drew would come in. Was that? Right. Did you guys get into the? I know there's a ton of father stuff, but I mean the cable over the thing. Do you think he really believes that this is why he's so messed up? Is because of that moment?
I mean, it's something to hang it on. That's for sure. I don't know. I didn't see the cable in the room. I don't know when that was put up or whatnot. We didn't talk about that in any of the books, but I don't know. There's no doubt that it probably accelerated his addiction. He was already sort of like using and was working construction and regularly like drinking and, doing coke and stuff like that. Any kind of tragedy in an addict's life is going to accelerate their use for sure. But sometimes I feel that, it was something that he always leaned on.
Yeah.
It can't just be that one, like all these years later. If you want to like come to peace with it, you got to do some therapy or figure something out. It can't just be that convenient that like, this is the reason why I do all this. It's like 30 years later, man, so, but it's an easy thing to hang it all on, but doesn't have him involved,
No, so. I mean, he's an interesting guy. I've met him a few times. Nice guy. Probably was messed up when he came through St. Louis. He talks about times when cheeseburgers were thrown at him. I don't think I did that, but you've spent time with a lot of interesting characters. Obviously, Tommy Lee. You talked about Slash, Eminem. So I kind of want to just get some thoughts on some of these folks that you've spent some time with. Eminem was kind of the guy that kind of broke you. You wrote the first book on Eminem. Still contact
cover story too.
Yeah, Rolling Stone. You wrote it, Rolling Stone. Yeah. Tell me about just the relationship. I've read the bio where you heard him and you're like, this guy's going to break, and you were totally right. That has to feel good. The one guy I remember saying that about, because Nelly was from St. Louis. I used to do a public access show, and so the guy before me would edit this music video show, and this last video all the time was Country Grammar, and it was before, and it's Nelly in front of St. Louis, and I'm like, that's going to be that seems like that's going to be pretty big. He's like, oh no, Nelly's going to be big. I'm like, oh, this is good that we know this. And I was right. Tell me what it was like just to sort of see Eminem from the beginning, and then how's your relationship with him? Do you continue to have conversations with him off, every 6 months, Christmas cards? Tell me just how that kind of started.
Marshall Mathers is really that.
I'm going to kill you.
Yeah. He's, I've seen him go through his, he's someone who's been sober for 13 or 14 years now. So I've seen like that side of it too, right? And at the beginning he was like a ton of fun, definitely using just a partier, but just so talented. And yeah, I'm not really like super friendly like that anymore. He's the kind of person that when he did get sober, which addicts have to do, they have to like really shrink their concentric circles of people. But I did write a second book, and with the cooperation of him and management and all that stuff, I'm still in like the good graces. But I used to get prank phone calls from him and stuff like that. That's a long time ago. But yeah, I don't really I'm not calling him on the weekends and stuff like that. But if I needed a quote or something, I can get it, that kind of thing. So it's professional.
Bad interviewer question. I was going to say, yeah, bad interviewer question. What favorite story? Two favorites, like something that really you think about when you've heard from him or being around him or something like that.
I just, look at him now, and, he's become such a pillar of the industry and of, hip hop history, essentially. Everything that I put in my first article in my first book, just this wild ride that I didn't even expect. Like I thought I was begged my editor to let me cover this kid. And he was like, all right, you can do like a little article about the music video for My Name Is. It's all over MTV, and this record comes out next month. Who knows what it's going to do? Feels like a one note. This guy's not the brightest. But anyway, so I thought I was going down to do an article on the video, and then all of a sudden I saw the numbers of what it was doing. And he said, all right, this is your shot. You're going to do the cover story. You're going to Detroit. You're going to do the whole thing. And I'd never done any of that. And, when I went and spent this one first night with him called Never Forget It, he had already been signed. He hadn't gotten any of his money yet. The record hadn't come out. So he was still living in a trailer that when we got to Detroit had an eviction notice on the door. And he left the doors open because they'd been robbed so many times. And, I was in a car with he and Kim and Haley, who's like, she was holding Haley. That stuff I'll never forget. That's like the core of his music, and his early music was like right there. And, his manager is still with Paul Rosenberg. They didn't have their act together enough to be like putting this on as some sort of theme. There's no way. This is how he was living. And when he came to New York, he was doing 3 little, appearances. One was at a big hip hop night. And one was actually at a 16-year-old's birthday. And so I went for that. And the 16-year-old was the daughter of some mobbed up Staten Island guy, like really mobbed up. I'm Italian American. I could smell that stuff. So we went there, and he had rented out like the movie theater in Staten Island that was just packed with kids, like it was the Beatles coming. And that kind of stuff I'll just never forget. It was like a hell of a night. It was so insane that all of us in his little entourage had to like stay on the stage, and the cops took us out the back and into the limo and out because the kids were in the street. They were mobbing hard. And he was just like laughing and rapping, and it took like 5 hits of ecstasy that night. Still rapping like amazing. His like knees were buckling because he was so high, but it didn't miss a beat. So, I mean, that's, I feel privileged to have been there at that moment. That's like the thing I'll never forget when I see him doing anything, essentially. Yeah,
I was going to say, I mean, to do the kind of books that you do and follow the people, they're going to have some skeletons and some real issues, right? I mean, it's impossible. Well, I could do a book on Hanson, I guess, but who's going to read it, right? I mean, how you pick your guys? Do you know it going in? All right, this could get ugly, or is that part of the fun? Not the fun, but the interest in that these guys. Tommy Lee obviously had just crazy stories. Slash. We're going to talk about Mick Fleetwood in a second, who's, 70? I mean, just is that what kind of brings you to these people to want to write with them?
I mean, I have to like the music, so that's part of it. They have to be interesting. When I ask myself, because I do get, a lot of calls to work with people, to my manager and stuff like that. And my main question that I always ask is, if they hadn't done all this cool stuff, would they still be interesting? So, I mean, Tommy Lee is such a character. Like if he was your local cable guy in your town, you would be psyched to go have beers with him on a Friday night, and because he would probably be the most beloved guy in the bar. Like he's just got this star quality, and he's ridiculous and amazing and hilarious. And so that, you know, that was like a no brainer. You know, Slash too is like the epitome of cool. He were like is just literally the coolest cat I've ever met, and the most ridiculous guitar player. So good. So I think that's part of it to me. And you know, all these guys, I don't sit there and go like, you know, let me find the most screwed up person and write a book with them. But I don't shy away from that kind of stuff. And I think I have an ability to, like, you know, when I was writer, like a senior writer at Rolling Stone, I did go on the road a lot with bands, and I'm sort of like comfortable with the lifestyle and everything. So maybe that enables me to kind of hang with them, earn their trust. But, yeah, I don't know. Darkness, everyone's got their dark sides, and they do come out. And, you know, people that live in that sort of privileged rock and roll strata where you can kind of get your hands on anything and all that kind of stuff, they're going to investigate that at some point, you know? So, especially guys from like earlier eras, like when things are a little, you know, not every person had a camera on them at all times.
Yeah, and then so I want to talk about what you're up to now, but at the same time, when you do a guy like Mick Fleetwood, you catch him probably later in his career, right? Probably in his 50s at that point. So there's so much more material, I would assume, right? I mean, it's harder when you can do Tommy Lee. He's in his late 20s, early 30s, Slash probably 30s, but now you got Mick Fleetwood.
No, they were older. Tommy was 40, okay. 44, and Mick is in his 70s.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Just like Tommy Lee.
Yeah, but Mick's in his 70s. I guess Tommy's an old guy now. I mean, he's a grandpa too, and so is Slash. But with Mick, it's harder. Let's talk about what you're doing with him, because we may run out of time here. Hopefully we don't. But just some of the things that you got going on right now, and then if we have a little more time, I'll continue peppering you with more questions.
Okay. Well, my last book was I did with Raekwon from Wu-Tang Clan. That came out a year ago in November. Paperback will be coming this year. And then I'm right in the middle of writing a graphic novel with Mick Fleetwood that's coming out on a company called Z2 Comics that put out amazing music-related comics. Check them out if anyone's a big music head. And what they like to do is do a comic about a period of time in an artist's life that's not documented. So it really lets the artists kind of go crazy with it. So we are doing a book called The Adventures of Young Mick Fleetwood. And it's about Mick's life before getting into Fleetwood Mac. People might not know, there's been 3 versions of Fleetwood Mac. You know, the third one is the one that everyone knows from America from the 70s with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. But the first one started in like 1967. And Mick dropped out of school when he was 15 in 1965 or 4, and lived in London with his sister Sally, who was really involved in the art world. And he had all kinds of crazy adventures playing in blues bands, like cover house bands, all this kind of stuff. He was in a band with Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood for like a few months before they went off and joined Jeff Beck's group. So he's got amazing stuff. His first girlfriend was Patty Boyd. Patty Boyd, who famously married George Harrison and Clapton, you know, that one, Layla. Mick dated her younger sister and married her. So when he was 16, playing in like a cover band in this, you know, basically this black dance club, he was running around at night with George Harrison, like going to parties with like the Beatles. So all this is going to be in the book, and it's going to be really cool. We've got a great artist named Dave Chisholm doing the art. It's going to be awesome.
I'm worried about music, Anthony. I mean, Taylor Hawkins passes, Christine McVie, my comedians, Norm Macdonald, Bob Saget, Jeff Beck. I mean, I'm really worried because, like, I'm getting to that age where I'm sure my dad was at some point going, shit, I have nothing to listen to now. I guess I'll listen to, like, Us Three or Tony, which he did buy records of that stuff. But, yeah, hopefully, you know, it's been sad to see some of these folks die, but I really appreciate your time. Anything else? Did we get everything? I think we're going to possibly run out of time, so I don't want to lose you, but anything?
I think we got 5 minutes. But yeah, that's cool. And yeah, that's about all I'm doing some work in the documentary world, doing this documentary, writing and producing this documentary about the cocktail world and this really difficult test that bartenders have to take, or they don't have to take, they choose to take. But yeah, other than that, I've got a book that hasn't been sold yet, so I can't jinx it, but it involves a late 90s, early 2000s of someone who became famous in that era. who's had a very crazy life and has had several near-death experiences. I'll leave it at that until I can announce anything. But yeah, I'm just doing my thing, man.
All right, well, we'll keep in touch. I want to ask one last question because you are still here. Tommy Lee, evidently, so I watched an interview with you, actually with Artie. You lived with him for some days there, and then also you wrote the book, a couple chapters as his member. Did you see the show on Hulu? Because they did the same thing. They were copying you. I don't know if you saw that. His thing was talking.
Yeah. They plagiarized me, and they suck. Those producers, I've sort of found out behind the scenes why, but yeah, they completely ripped off the book, didn't option it, didn't ask permission, didn't even get in touch with me, even though, I've met Sebastian Stan a couple times, wonderful dude, and he was like, yeah, I read the book like 5 times, and, thank you for that. We were told by production that, like, no one from that side is going to get involved. No one's going to talk. Don't even bother. And I was like, yeah, I want to talk to you. So, yeah, that's a case of, honestly, it's Tommy's copyright on the book. If it was mine, I would have done something about it pretty publicly. And I just don't think he wanted the headache, or, it's not like he needs the money. So, that's kind of the case with that. But yeah, the second episode of that Pam and Tommy situation is pretty much a direct, if you did that in college, you would be called on plagiarism and probably expelled. It's that bad. Because I even wrote that section as a script because Pam was involved in the writing of the book, and I had both of their versions literally as dialogue telling the period of how they met. And it's literally beat for beat if you watch it. It pisses me off because, the guy like DVD Vincentis is a writer who's adapted books before for Nick Hornby. He should know better. Like, just shame on all of them, frankly. It could have just been like a courtesy call or something like that. But yeah, they didn't do any of that.
Don't watch it then.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I brought that up. I didn't realize it was a direct ripoff. Okay. But when I saw that happen,
Talking Penis was my idea. I brought it to Tommy, and he was like, "Yeah, dude, fucking yeah." So, and we did it. The penis talks through the whole book. So he argues about who's more famous. That was the joke that we run through the whole book. So. Yeah.
No, I don't like people getting their material stolen. I've had that happen to me. It pisses me off, even on a smaller scale, if it's a cardinal feature or something, so I totally understand.
Yeah. Like I said, if it was my IP, you'd be hearing about it, but it's not my fight.
Well, hopefully we'll catch up again in the future here. Yeah. We'll talk more about the Tommy Lee stuff. I really appreciate your time today and your Artie stuff, and hopefully he's doing well, right? Let's all wish Artie doing well. All right.
Yeah, say a prayer for Art.
That's Anthony Bozza. We appreciate your time, and I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Who's eating me? I know you're a huge fan. I mean, huge literally. I heard you love me on the radio. I heard 5 people saw your movie. 3 of them wanted a refund. How? Your movie was free. Are you still telling your stories? How do you like your present? Me! Me, I'm your present, get it?